Hi guys, happy St. Patrick's Day. Today we're going to talk a little bit about Irish history, the history of immigration to the US, and some of the Irish in Dearborn. So let's just jump right in. Ireland has endured centuries of hardship, most of it at the hands of the English. Now, by the early 1800s, Ireland had been made part of Great Britain, putting it under direct English rule. And this did not go very well for the Irish people. Most of the land in Ireland was put under the control of large aristocratic nobles that lived in England. Most of them never even visited Ireland in their life, but they would own tens of thousands of acres of land. And most of this was used to raise cattle and to graze other animals for profit and for export to England. This left very little land, usually the very poor rocky soils, to the actual Irish to try to tend and survive. Most Irish had land holdings of only 2 to 6 acres, and from this they had to raise enough food to feed their own family and to raise enough to sell at market to pay the rent of being on the aristocrats' land. This led to very hard and terrible life for most Irish, and immigration throughout the early parts of the 1800s increased decade after decade, after years and years of not having enough land, food, or money to even survive. This was exacerbated by the Great Famine, which happened from 1845 to 1852. Now, earlier in 1845, a blight had appeared in potatoes in the US and made its way to Europe, where it decimated the crop. But this hit Ireland especially hard because they were reliant on a single variety of potato. Remember, the Irish were farming in the poor rocky soils, and potatoes were really the only crop they could grow. So they would raise them to feed themselves and to sell at market. Now, when the blight hit, it destroyed almost 2/3 or more of the potato crop, and this led to tons and tons of problems. Over 1 million people starved or died of diseases related to starvation in this time. Over 500,000 people were evicted off their lands that they were renting because they couldn't pay the rent. And over 2 million people, which was 25% of the total population of Ireland, immigrated to other British colonies or to the US. Now, the English did try to help a little bit with some reforms and some relief in the workhouses and stuff, but really the Irish were left out to dry. The English didn't really do much for them, and honestly, the English were kind of secretly happy to be getting rid of the Irish because they could get more land. In the years around the famine, there was heavy immigration to other British colonies, especially Canada. By 1860, nearly 50% of the population of Toronto was Irish. Now, in the 1850s, in Dearborn Township, there was about 94 people claiming to be of direct Irish ancestry, out of a total of about 650. So that makes it about 14% of the population. By 1860, the percentage of Irish had risen to 18%, with about 150 people claiming to be right from Ireland. And they settled here in this area in many of these farms. Now let's talk about some of the people that came here. This lady is Miss Frances Green Halpin. Green was her maiden name. She was born in 1818 in Ireland. She came to Dearborn around 1838 from New York State. She married in 1846 in Detroit to James Halpin, and they came out here. They had at least 7 children, and they lived on a farm just on the west side of Military Street at Alexandria, just north of the river. And you can see their plot of land just above her head. This photo shows George Moore. Now, he was born here in Michigan, but his father, who was known as James Moore, was born in the year 1800 in Ireland. We don't know exactly when his father and his mother came here, but they were in Dearborn by 1840. And here we see part of their farm, which is now in George's name, and that was on the east side of Greenfield between Ford and Paul Avenue. And the Moores continued to be in Dearborn for at least the next 100 years. Another Irish that settled here in Dearborn was William Ford. He was born in 1826 in County Cork, Ireland, and he came to this area in 1847 with his father John. And he would later inherit the family farm, purchasing part of it, and he would go on to have a very famous son by the name of Henry. Another Irish family was Michael and Elizabeth McFadden. Michael was born in 1802 in Ireland, and the next time he pops up is in 1839 when he's marrying Elizabeth in Detroit. So he must have immigrated sometime in there. Now they lived on a large farm on the east side of Telegraph Road near Michigan Avenue. And they farmed this land for quite a while. Michael was very instrumental in building the Episcopal Church here in Dearborn, and he died 1 month after its completion in 1871. Now, Michael had a brother named William who was still back in Ireland. In 1846, he died, and his wife had died a few years before, leaving their 3 children as orphans. The 3 children lived for a little bit with the parish priest of their town back in Ireland, and around 1853, Michael arranged for these 3 children, his 2 nieces and a nephew, to come and live with him on his farm here in Michigan. The 2 nieces and nephew that were sent to live with Uncle Michael McFadden were Jane, James, and Elizabeth. Elizabeth is seen here, and this is where they were from. They were from a little town called Fawn, Ireland. Elizabeth was born in 1837, and her mother had died just 2 years later. Her father died when she was a teenager, and she also was in Ireland during the time of the famine. And she finally came to live with her Uncle Michael about 1855, when she would be about 18 years old. And here's just a few pictures of Fawn today, what it kind of looks like. It's right on the bay. It has a huge beach. Today it only has a population of about 588, so it's still a very small town, and it's located about 8 miles from the city of Derry. Another Irishman who just happened to come and live with Uncle Michael McFadden was named Nathaniel Ross, and he was from Ballyclare, Ireland. He was born in 1825 and came to Dearborn about 1853, where he became a farmhand on the McFadden farm. Now while there, he of course met the niece of Michael McFadden, Miss Elizabeth, and they were married in 1859. And here are some pictures of what Ballyclare looks like. Today it's a town of about 9,000, but in Nathaniel's time it would have been less than 1,500. It grew pretty quickly with introduction of a railroad, and it became a factory town. They were known for a paper mill. Nathaniel and Elizabeth would end up living on Uncle Michael's farm into the 1880s. In 1883, they bought the old powder magazine of the U.S. Arsenal and converted it into a home that they were living in by 1884. The couple ended up having 7 children, only 3 of whom would survive to adulthood. And this home and its collection would become the basis for the Dearborn Historical Museum. In going through some of the archives of what was in the house when it was acquired, they found a lot of Irish sheet music and a fiddle and several musical instruments. So it's very obvious that the family was trying to keep to their Irish roots and teach their children some of the traditions they may have heard and seen back in Ireland. Thank you for joining me on this short foray into Irish history and the Irish in Dearborn. And the Irish are just one of many ethnic groups that make Dearborn the great city that it is today. Thanks again for joining me. Have a great St. Patrick's Day.